Hey guys, as promised, here is this video going through some of the bigger concepts. Oh, sorry, had to get my camera right. That we missed from today's class. So this is the beginning of our World War II unit. I about said one. It's been a long day. But the focus of these slides is all about the United States being neutral. Okay, which you recall from World War One unit, we're trying to stay out of this conflict the best we can. As with the World War II, as like you have Hitler trying to take over and expand Germany, Mussolini in Italy, they're trying to do the same thing. Japan is starting to take over control over parts of East Asia. But throughout all of this, the United States, we're trying our darndest. We are trying to stay out of this. And even before World War II really started, the United States was going ahead and kind of proceeding with eliminating some of our intervention type tactics that we had used under imperialism. One big one was the FDR's good neighbor policy, which you guys remember we talked about, like the Roosevelt corollary, where the United States could basically be like the policeman of the Western Hemisphere and just kind of interject and do anything they wanted to in pretty much any Latin American nation, like we saw in Cuba or Panama or Nicaragua or the Dominican Republic. The list goes on and on. But FDR, he decided that had kind of left a bad taste in people's mouths about the United States. So we wanted to get away from that. And we wanted to get away from, for instance, having troops in Haiti. Forgot to mention Haiti. And so this really marks that shift away from where the United States during imperialism, we were really trying to we intervened in places around Latin America. We're trying to not do that as much. And that's reflective of a larger idea known as isolationism. Now, you guys remember this from our imperialism unit, so I'm not going to talk about this a lot. But remember, George Washington recognized that it could be very beneficial to the United States if we tried to stay out of everybody's business. The United States is kind of on an island by itself. It's away from Europe. It's away from Asia. We have oceans literally on both sides. Okay. So even from the days of George Washington, he recognized that it'd be best if we'd be isolationists, if we would stay isolated and focused on our own issues. So on your PSA, okay, of FDR's statement of neutrality, it mentions the historical precedent that, like, what's the historical precedent that Washington said? Like, what is FDR referring to? It's this. It's isolationism. That's what Washington believed in from the start. That would be what is best for the United States. But isolationists, again, they believed it was best for us to stay out of foreign conflicts. And honestly, many isolationists, people wanting us to stay neutral and out of World War II, were just like, we got enough crap to deal with. Because in a history class, it's easy for us to be like, oh, y'all just took a quiz over the 1920s and the Great Depression. Okay, we're done with that. But you can't do that. Because you got to think, like, we're talking about all these events in the 1930s that built on each other and led up to World War II. It's not like the events we talked about in the 1930s with the Great Depression just weren't going on anymore. Okay, they're still going on in the United States. So many people were like, man, we got enough crap to deal with. Like, 1 in 4 people are unemployed, 1 in 4 people are hungry. We have much bigger fish to fry than this conflict in Europe and around the world. So many isolationists were really wanting to stay out of the war. America First movement, okay, people like Charles Lindbergh, which if you don't know who he is the guy that was like the first to like fly solo across the Atlantic. That was a pretty big deal in the 1920s. But America First movement, again, they opposed us getting involved in the war in any way. Okay, any aid or involvement, sending troops directly, anything like that. Put America first, okay, and not worry about anybody else. But then this group starts to lose a little bit, okay, because as soon as France had fallen into the hands of the Nazis and Britain, obviously with the Blitz of London, was getting hammered. The Germans were trying to get the British to surrender. The America First movement loses a little bit of steam. Okay, and we realize we can't just stick our head in the sand and ignore this conflict anymore. Especially after Pearl Harbor, that was the nail in the coffin, and it got totally disbanded, but it was losing support before because of these events up here. Okay. Now, and after Pearl Harbor, even people who were members of America First supported the United States going to war with Japan. Now, this is actually interesting because one of the ones who was really for us getting involved in the war was actually Dr. Seuss. Okay. Let's see. There you go, right there. Dr. Seuss. Okay. And you're like, okay, what is this cartoon saying? Dr. Seuss was basically implying that America First was dangerous to the world because look, this nice little lady with the America First sweater. She's reading to the children, and she's reading them the nightmare of Adolf the Wolf. And the wolf chewed up the children and spit out their bones, but those were foreign children, and it didn't really matter. So Adolf the Wolf, this is talking about Adolf Hitler. Okay. And so it's showing America First is kind of ignorant and, like just kind of uninvolved and unworried about the rest of the world. Because it's like, those were foreign children. The wolf got those foreign kids, but they didn't really matter. They're not from here. So it's showing that America First could be dangerous to the world because, we're not paying attention to the rest of the world. And we're part of the world. Because here's the thing. During this time, all these countries, have leaders who are wanting to expand. And not only are they just wanting to expand, but several of them are fascist dictators. Okay. During the war, we'd fight against Japan, Italy, and Germany. We did get on an alliance. We were on the same side as the Soviet Union and Joseph Stalin, but that is only because he ticked him off because they were supposed not to attack each other at all. They signed a non-aggression pact, and then Hitler got the idea to go up and attack Russia, which, if you know world history, that never turns out well for anybody. Ask Napoleon. But anyway, moving on. So the early neutrality acts. So as soon as, things start to escalate in Europe in 1935, is we would not trade at all with any of the nations who were at war or who were, escalating toward a conflict or trying to take over places. Americans could not even travel on ships from the nations at war. And on your essential questions, it asks you, how are these decisions by Congress connected to events during World War One? Well, you think about this. This first bullet right here, we would not trade with the nations at war. Remember, we said we were neutral in World War One, yet we were trading extensively with the Allies. And, bankers were giving money to the Allied countries in World War One. And so that is what led Germany, in escalation. Germany started to attack us for that. And speaking of that, Germany attacks. Remember, several Americans were on ships such as the Lusitania, which was a British ocean liner, that was attacked. So with the early neutrality acts, we're trying to avoid those same mistakes because we totally ban any travel on ships that are from nations who are now involved in this conflict. Okay. So that's how these decisions by Congress are connected to the events from World War One. Okay. So events leading up to World War II. So 1935, again, I'm not going to beat a dead horse here, but this is just showing you how these countries are truly trying to expand their power because Italy attacks Ethiopia, an African nation located on the Horn of Africa, down there by the Persian Gulf. Okay. Now, about 40 years before, Italy had tried to attack Ethiopia, and Ethiopia actually succeeded in fending off the Italian attack. But it's like World War II was all about revenge. Okay. I think like there were other factors involved, but revenge was a big thing that drove some of these leaders' decisions and the reason why some of them had support. Okay. Because Italy obviously wanted to get Ethiopia back. They were kind of salty about losing. And then Germany, who was obviously humiliated in World War One, blatantly violates the Treaty of Versailles. My Kentucky accent almost said Versailles, because they take over the Rhineland, which, if you don't know what the Rhineland is, it's basically this like buffer zone that the Treaty of Versailles created between Germany and France. Well, Hitler totally ignored the Treaty of Versailles. It said that there was not supposed to be any military equipment in the demilitarized zone, hence demilitarized. But Hitler started to move troops and supplies into the Rhineland. So this is not going to end well. And then, if that's not bad enough, we got all this crap going on in Europe. Well, Japan decides to invade China, which is kind of funny. Not funny, but China has a civil war going on at this time, and they just kind of put that on hold because they're like, you know what, we dislike Japanese people even more than we hate fighting among we like fighting amongst ourselves. So Japan starts to try to take over and succeeds in some aspects. They take over parts of China during this time, including, um, I mean, you're just talking about massive, massive losses on the civilian side. The atrocities that the Japanese military committed against Chinese civilians is unbelievable. Some estimates in one incident alone say 300,000 were like raped, tortured, and or killed. So that's something to consider. 1938. So, as Hitler, back to Europe, as Hitler is trying to expand, France and Britain try to appease Hitler by giving Germany part of Czechoslovakia, which was a region of Czechoslovakia that was largely German speaking, and their logic again, end of the day. Logic was like, oh, you know what? If we give Hitler this, maybe he'll stop his expansionist desires. Maybe. But this was not going to work. The saying appeasement only makes the aggressor more aggressive comes from this scenario. Because you have to think, okay, they gave Hitler a little bit of land. They thought, he's power hungry. This will kind of satisfy his appetite and he'll be done trying to take over Europe. Why did the United States and most other countries quickly condemn Russia for their invasion of Ukraine? It's related to this. Because that was a major mistake the world made, France and Great Britain especially. When Hitler took over when Hitler expanded, instead of trying to get a firm hand on him, they tried to appease him and just let him, they just gave him land. And and obviously that didn't work. So that's why when Russia tried to take over Ukraine, which believe it or not, it's been a year and a half since the invasion started, all the countries around the world quickly condemned that. Cash carry policy. So this was a revision of the Neutrality Acts as things continued to worsen in Europe, but also in Asia, as we were wanting to send supplies to China to help fend off the Japanese and help them in their fight against that. Um, we we began to start to sell to the nations at war, but we did it with a cash and carry policy. So any goods that would be purchased from the U.S. would be paid for up front in cash and transported in non-U.S. ships. So we weren't allowing them to take credit; they had to have all the money to pay for it, and that's the way it would be. And this is significant. The reason why it's non-U.S. ships is because obviously we don't want our ships involved in all of this. Okay, we don't want to get our hands dirty. So if a country bought goods from us, they had to pick it up in their own ships. So World War II begins on September 1st, 1939. A good student of history knows that. Okay, September 1st of 1939 is when Germany officially invaded Poland. And after this, Great Britain and France realized they got a problem because they declare war on Germany 2 days after that. So by 1939, obviously this is a grave crisis. Okay, Germany has invaded Poland. Great Britain and France have declared war on Germany. It's really starting to unravel and escalate. Okay, so the new Neutrality Act in 1939 allowed us to sell weapons to Great Britain and France on that cash and carry basis. So again, they had to pay for it up front and they had to transport the weapons on their ships. But the difference between the act in 1937 1939 is the 1937 act did not allow for weapons to be sold, but now weapons are allowed to be sold. Because what was driving us to make this decision was the fact that France had fallen. And we're not just talking like, they had fought each other a year or two and yada, yada, yada. No, we're talking like Germany went into France and kicked their tails. Like, you're talking about France falling in a matter of weeks. And then the concern starts to be, okay, France has fallen to the Nazis. Between us and France, yeah, we got the ocean, but they knew Germany would go after Great Britain next. And then once they get control of Great Britain, then it's just a matter of maybe a sea fight between the United States and Germany. So it was starting to get crap was starting to hit the fan a little bit. We were starting to realize, okay, yeah, Germany and Hitler represents a very significant threat to us and the world. So in March of 1941, okay, Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and FDR come to this agreement, the Lend-Lease Act, which Congress approved it, basically where the United States would be allowed to lend or lease, in other words, let other countries borrow equipment that they need to fight this war against the Nazis. I mean, you look at this, we send $7 billion in aid to Great Britain alone. So we're really trying to prop up Great Britain and prevent them from, falling to the Nazis. But the question is, are we truly acting like a neutral nation with this policy? Not really. And I believe that's everything because this is what y'all were doing for homework. Let me double check. Yep. And this is where we will pick off on class on Wednesday. Appreciate you guys bearing with me. Wednesday will be a loaded class, but it'll be an interesting class. We are going to look at Pearl Harbor. We are going to look at how World War II impacted daily life in the United States. So kind of a review of some of the things that we talk about World War One, like the Liberty Bonds and the food rationing and the factories mass producing for the war, all that stuff. But also we'll talk about some things like the changing role of African Americans during this time, African Americans in the military, and also the way Japanese Americans were treated, which is one of the worst injustices, in my opinion, of United States history. We'll talk more about that on Wednesday, and then obviously close with D-Day and the invasion of France, which is kind of the tipping point of the fall of Nazi Germany. But we got a loaded plate on Wednesday. It's going to be great. It's going to be a lot of notes. It's going to be a lot of discussion, but it is going to be a good class, and I cannot wait to see you guys. Y'all have a great rest of your day.